The 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act is being celebrated across the nation this year, and especially here in New York. To tell us why, we're joined by Bob Bullock with the Rockefeller Institute and Dave Gibson with Adirondack Wild. Welcome. Nice to have you both here.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Wilderness Act in September of 1964. And at the time, it first protected about, 9 million acres of forest land.
That's right.
And over 50 years, it now covers well over 100 million acres.
Yes.
New York, New Yorkers have been very interested in this for a number of years, and that's because much of the credit for the national program is being given to New York.
That's exactly right, Tom. Nothing started in 1964. It really started here in New York State in the 1880s, and then in 1894 when the New Yorkers voted for our Forever Wild clause in our state constitution, which still, 54 words, still protects the forest preserve here in the Adirondack region and in the Catskill region. And it's the only state in the nation that has constitutional protection for its forests. And Howard Zahniser, the author of the National Act of 1964, came to this region in the Adirondacks in 1946, never left. For the rest of his life, he vacationed here, and he took his inspiration to draft a national bill, which took 18 years to succeed, from Article 14 of our Constitution.
So when we hear famously that he said New York was really the beginning of the conservation movement in America, or the wilderness protection movement in America, that's why.
It's really true, yes.
And he had a cabin in the Adirondacks in the Johnsburg area where he spent months and years?
Yes. My mentor and the founder of my organization, which its formal name is Friends of the Forest Preserve, or Adirondack Wild, Paul Schaefer, befriended Howard in 1946 and showed him a cabin just above Paul's cabin. Howard said, "This is going to be my vacation home for the rest of my life." And he was so taken by the rustic nature of that cabin, the environment, the people that befriended him locally in Baker's Mills, New York, and by Paul and Paul's dedication to Forever Wild, that he made that his vacation home for the next 18 years, and he began to draft the federal bill right there.
And because New York had its protection already dating back 120 years, New York is one of 6 states that isn't covered under the National Wilderness Act because it was already in New York's Constitution.
That's right, and every opportunity that New Yorkers have been given to say, do you want more federal land in New York State, they've generally rejected that idea, thinking that they can, as voters of New York State, they are responsible for whether or not Forever Wild continues. It could be changed and amended every 2 years by the legislature, but unlike the National Act, we get a say in that. You and I and Bob and all of New Yorkers, wherever they live, get to vote on whether we want to change Forever Wild or not.
And because New York was such an inspiration for the National Act, that explains why this year, to celebrate the 50th anniversary, New York is really part of that celebration. And Bob, the Rockefeller Institute of Government and college campuses and other organizations across the state, like Dave's organization, Adirondack Wild, are really marking this occasion.
You know, we saw it as a great opportunity. First, if you take a look back at the 40th year anniversary of the Wilderness Act, a dedicated group of folks came together and they put together a conference that was meaningful, albeit somewhat small, and that was really almost the sum total of the activity to celebrate 40 years. When Adirondack Wild and the Rockefeller Institute came together, we recognized that we had a special responsibility. A responsibility first to share the story with New Yorkers, but then moreover to draw attention to the rest of the nation because there are activities going on in the other 49 states as well. To really say to them that this is our special contribution to federal environmental protection legislation. And so we came together, and then the critical question is, how do you make this important? How do you make it meaningful? And from all of our conversations, we said the best place to put this is in our local colleges and universities. And of course, you folks here in the Champlain Valley area know what wonderful conveners Clinton Community College and SUNY Plattsburgh are. And We met with not only the presidents of Clinton and Plattsburgh, but we also really got together with the presidents of SUNYs and independents from the Mid-Hudson Valley all the way up to the Canadian border and over into the St. Lawrence Valley, threw down the gauntlet and said, this is our challenge. And each and every one of these college presidents put together a dedicated group of faculty members and administrators. They all sat down with us. And I have to say, and I'm sure that Dave agrees with me, that every time we went to the campuses, we were kind of blown away by the energy and the commitment and the dedication. And now we're starting to see it as these activities are actually occurring.
So it's really a year-long celebration, not just a few days or even a few weeks.
Exactly.
And the anniversary of the signing was September 3rd of this year. And Clinton Community College, SUNY Plattsburgh, just within the past couple of weeks, held a week-long series of lectures and other events and documentaries being shown. But really, it's continuing right on through the fall and even into early next year on other campuses.
In some cases, the campuses are doing things like they're using their art galleries to put out photography and art. In some cases, there are ongoing programs of lectures that they really envisioned wanting to take so far beyond the September 3rd date into October, November, and in some cases into the spring of 2015. So they got it.
Inspiring new leadership, as Bob is suggesting, is a big theme of our wilderness celebration this year, involving young people because they are our future stewards of wild country, wild nature, and they are going to inherit Article 14. They're going to vote on Article 14 in the future. But we also wanted to recommit the DEC, the State Environmental Conservation Department, to its mission as the public custodian in the public trust of our forest preserve. And so DEC got involved right from the start. And we're very, very pleased to be working closely with the Division of Lands and Forests, with Commissioner Martens, and throughout the anniversary year. And we had a very big celebration at Bob's shop in Albany at the Nelson Rockefeller Institute, where the commissioner and his deputy came and made a big contribution during the month of May. So DEC has a big role to play.
And it obviously comes at a time where DEC is playing a huge role right now. New York continues to add acreage to wilderness protection, and certainly over the past couple of years, the Finch Prine lands were up for sale. The Nature Conservancy helped orchestrate that deal with New York State. Thousands and thousands of acres, the Hudson River Gorge, the Essex Chain Lakes, and those areas still, plans are being worked out on how much do you set aside and truly make off limits and how much do you allow access to, and so there's that balancing that's going on still to this day.
Yes, but your point about the commitment New York State made, the Governor Cuomo and his commissioner, to the Finch Prine lands, 161,000 acres up for sale in 2007. In 2011, we saw the first acquisition, 2012, of the Essex Chain, and now the management of that area. The state is devoting a lot of time to how it manages that as a primitive area, so that it's going to be available for future generations and it won't be degraded. And we're heavily involved with them in that discussion, as are all stakeholders in the park. So big kudos to the Nature Conservancy, the governor, and to the DEC for committing to this big project.
Trying to figure out how much to keep primitive, how much to allow access to even possibly motorized vehicles or snowmobiles. And
yes, absolutely. Recreational access is terribly important, as is access in terms of the human imagination. I mean, you don't have to visit a wilderness area to be a backer and supporter of wilderness. In fact, most people in this country and in this state never visit a wilderness area, yet want to know that those areas exist. Sennheiser knew that. He knew that his supporters would not be hikers, they would not be fishers, they wouldn't be hunters. Most of his backers throughout the country were people who simply wanted to know that a piece of wild heritage in this country would be preserved forever, and by the Congress, or in this case, by the legislature and by the voters.
And Tom, one of the most exciting things about our celebration, truly we were inspired by getting together with all of the campuses, but I think the dedication, the conservation easement on the Sennheiser property, so that folks can really use this as an opportunity to make their way down to, this just blessed, sacred space. If you take a look at the connection that it provides to both Howard Sennheiser and Paul Schaefer, I think it's one of our most important contributions.
The alliance that they made, state and federal alliance, continues to this day. We have New Yorkers who have, including Howard's own son, Ed Zahniser, who continues to vacation right there, but who spent 35 years at the National Park Service. So there's, all sorts of partnerships continue to sustain wilderness here in New York and across the country.
Howard Zahniser was really one of several people who visited the Adirondacks who had this vision for protecting wilderness across the country.
And another very significant name that many of your viewers will be familiar with is Bob Marshall, because Bob helped start the Adirondack 46ers. He climbed all the high peaks. He grew up in Lower Saranac Lake with his father, Louis Marshall. Louis helped found the college at Syracuse, which is now the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry. And Louis helped defend Article 14 in the 1890s and in the early 20th century. Bob went on to work for the federal government and to explore wilderness, the potential for wilderness, before Howard Zahniser, and actually go out and look at wilderness areas and rate them as to the potential for being wilderness in the future at a time when Americans weren't ready for wilderness. But he was the leader, he was a pioneer, and he drew from his Adirondack experience and that determination to make that next peak. He'd climb 10 to 20 peaks a day. And he drew on that grit and determination to form the Wilderness Society with his own money in 1935, and look what the Wilderness Society has done across the country ever since. And they're a key partner in this celebration across the country.
And obviously that also had an influence on Howard.
And they went on
Zahniser.
to hire Howard Zahniser, one of the smartest moves they ever made.
And in New York now, just under 5 million acres protected?
The forest preserve is 3 million acres, rounded, between the Catskills and Adirondacks.
Okay.
And then there's an additional number of state forests that add up, so that to another 1 million acres. And then you have a whole bunch of conservation easements on private land where the landowner says, I want to complement the forest preserve, I want to complement the state forest and protect my own land and still be able to use it in appropriate ways. And so you have a burgeoning conservation easement program that's nearly 1 million acres.
So in total,
So in total, it's 4 to 5 million acres. You're exactly right.
And ongoing efforts, always looking for more.
Well, we're looking for more, and the way we do that in this state since 1990 is through open space conservation advisory committees, so that people from Plattsburgh, people from Ballston Spa, New York, people from all over the area get to join a citizen committee to advise the DEC and the Office of Parks about important open space projects around the state. And it's been that way for a long time, and it's a wonderful collaborative process. We don't always agree when we get together, but we at least begin to understand each other's points of view. And there's a lot of consensus about which lands we should dedicate scarce taxpayer resources to acquire or to protect.
And still probably people look at various parts of New York and see areas that they see and think that ought to be protected.
Absolutely, and these can be small parcels of 200 acres or larger parcels like Finch Prine. There's many 200, 100-acre parcels that are very significant, provide public access, recreational access, to protect a small pond or watershed. These have equal value sometimes to the larger projects.
And this is a big part of also why you're celebrating. You're not only holding the events and celebrating what happened 50 years ago, but you're really trying to raise awareness and perhaps inspire a new generation. And as you mentioned, Bob, that's probably why college campuses are perfect.
I think that's right. College campuses look at themselves as places where folks come together to share ideas. One of the things that we've been most excited about is the multidisciplinary approach. Maggie Madden, who's the provost over at SUNY Potsdam, came up to me after their kickoff it will be about a month ago by the time this program airs, but Maggie said, Bob, in all of the things that we do here at Potsdam, she said, I've never seen our faculty come around a single issue the way that they've come around. And it wasn't only the faculty at SUNY Potsdam, because Potsdam, Canton, Clarkson, and St. Lawrence all work together in the St. Lawrence Valley to really put together a seminal list of programs that will continue on into 2015. And we've seen that across the board. As Dave and I have said, and our colleagues on the organizing committee have said, if we have the opportunity to, you introduce these programs to thousands of folks, I think everybody walks away having learned something certainly about the wonderful environmental legacy of New York State. But how many are going to be inspired to then take what they've learned and go on and perpetuate that throughout their lives? If we only have a small number, I think our faculty members are rededicating themselves even as we speak, as they see the effect and the impact that they're having. But if we can get a small number of those students, or even a large number of those students, to walk away and say, this has affected the way I think about the outdoors. In fact, the imploration that we gave them after Phil Terry, the Adirondack historian, had spoken in Potsdam was, at the end, we said, okay, now you've learned, now get outside. Go out and do something with this. And that's really the call to action, more than anything else that we could have done or said.
Bob Bullock, Dave Gibson, thanks a lot for taking the time to be with us.
You're very
Thanks,
welcome.
Tom.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.